lights fade, the curtains rise. New stories waiting behind our eyes. Charlotte and John with the final say, breaking down the screens in their own way. This is the final cut, where the real review...
Well, hello there. Welcome to another Final Cut podcast. And this week, it's absolutely no cliche to say that we've got the hairstylist to the stars with us. This is another one of our really interesting podcasts featuring people who've worked in or around Hollywood. And today, I'm delighted to welcome Bonnie Clevering, who has had a career spanning over 50 years, starting with the tail end of the Hollywood studio era and taking us right up to the present day. She's worked in over 120 productions in the hair or makeup department, hairstylist, and it's her list of actors that she's worked with is stellar. Everybody from would you believe Elvis Presley and Betty Davis in the 60s, right through to names that are household names today like Brad Pitt, Julia Roberts, Keanu Reeves, Hilary Swank, Al Pacino, Jennifer Aniston. Not only that, but she's also worked with some of the most distinguished directors in Hollywood. Names as multifarious as Paul Verhoeven, Oliver Stone, who she's worked with in numerous pictures, including JFK and Born on the 4th of July, Brian De Palma, also Steven Soderbergh. So this is a lady with an absolute stellar set of credits. And since 2001, she's been a member of the Academy of Arts and Motion Picture Sciences, i.e. the people that give out the Oscars. So I'm delighted to welcome Bonnie here today. And in September, you can read all about her history in Hollywood. She's got a new memoir out called Continuity: Life Beyond the Credits, co-written with her son, Jason. And this is going to be published via Punctuate Press and will be available to order online. So, Bonnie, without further ado, it's an absolute delight to welcome you. Welcome to Final Cut Podcast.
Welcome. Oh, I'm so pleased to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. And you can see you're actually holding up your book there.
Yes.
A lovely gold-colored copy by the looks of it.
Yes, very heavy. Hundreds and hundreds of pictures of all kinds of things.
Wow.
Yeah, it goes on and on.
Amazing.
Yes. So people can order this online, I believe.
In Amazon.
Yes, as you said. Yes, they can. And it's even by continuity by bonnieclevering.com. So yeah, and then they'll have it in September.
Great stuff. Well, look, as a sort of taster for actually people buying and reading that extensive memoir, let us try and take you through some of the highlights of your career. No pun intended when we're talking about hairstyling. So, going to take you right the way back. You weren't born in Hollywood. I think you came to Hollywood, didn't you? Can you maybe explain to us how you first got into the movie business?
Hey, went to Hollywood in 1964, and I had a hairstyling license in the state of Florida. So I knew when I went to Hollywood, I would work at a beauty salon and have to get a California state license. And so when we were newly married, and when we got there, I started looking at salons. And then there's a gentleman that lived in the apartment complex we did. And he said, why don't you try to see about getting in the studios as a hairstylist? And I thought, yeah, every hairdresser's dream to do movie stars. Well, he kept pushing me. So I went ahead and I met Carmen Dorigo, who was the head hairdresser back then on Petticoat Junction and the Beverly Hillbillies. And so I met her, and she took such a liking, she referred me to the head hairdresser at 20th Century Fox. And so I got my state license, and then at the beginning, I just worked on big movies where I just worked on extras because I didn't have the experience. So I
Mm.
just learned from the other hairdressers and eventually had to take a union test that was 2 nights of 8-hour nights of just showing how to apply an Indian wig, a toupee, a period wig, yeah, all kinds of hairstyling tools too to use.
So
Wow.
to clarify for our viewers, so what does a hairstylist do on the set, and what I mean, I believe questions like continuity is very important. What is actual role of a hairstylist?
Well, now we have a makeup trailer where at the very beginning we always did our actors in a studio and then go to the stage. But basically, the last many, many years, you have a makeup trailer that consists of makeup and hairstylists, and and then the actor comes in, and depending on if their hair is wet or if they don't have to have a lot of hair, they'll go to makeup first. But usually they'll come to hair first because either I have to wrap their head properly to apply a wig later on in the morning, and they go to makeup, and then they come back to hair. Or if it's a hairstylist that a hairstyle that really needs last minute work, they'll even go and get their wardrobe on, come back to the makeup trailer, finish their hair, and then we go to the set. And then where the continuity comes in is after every scene, I take pictures, and we use Polaroid film for many years, and
Mm.
then mark the Polaroid with the scene number and the day of the script. And then we keep those because it might be where Julia Roberts is outside, we're filming in the rain or the snow, and then she walks up to the door, and it might be 2 months later, we filmed the interior. So that's why I have to take the front, each side, and the back of the hairstyle for every scene because I have to match that when she walks in that living room or wherever she's walking into days or months later. And so that's where the continuity, comes in, and that's part of the continuity of life too that I write about in my book.
Yes, yes. Well, we would be remiss if we didn't touch on some of these major stars that you worked with in the early years of your career. Elvis Presley. Uh,
Oh,
how did
yeah.
you come to work with him, and how did you find him as a star, both as a star and as a person?
Well, I was working at MGM Studios, and I had just finished a series with Robert Wagner and Stephanie Powers called "The Girl from Uncle and the Man from Uncle,"
Mm.
and uh, and so that was up, and then the head of the department assigned me. It was more or less assigning me to the Speedway, the Presley Sinatra movie, and so I was in charge of Nancy, and then touching up or watching Elvis because the makeup man was the one that actually did his hair in the morning. But a lot of the men just did their hair at home, and then we would just watch it during. But what was one of the most exciting things during the filming, Priscilla Presley was pregnant with Lisa Marie, and Nancy Sinatra gave Priscilla a baby shower and invited me up to her home. And there were just maybe 12 women there. And I, at the time, had an infertility problem and had a lot of miscarriages. So halfway through the shower, Nancy had Priscilla and I stand up. So what is she doing? And it's an old Italian wives' tale to rub the hands on a pregnant woman's stomach, and that's supposed to bring you luck. And that was the month after about 2.5 years, I got pregnant with
Mm.
Wow,
Jason.
that's amazing.
Yeah. And so I have um, a little in the book, there's a picture of the little thank you note that Elvis and I want to thank you for the gift. And the return address was Memphis, handwritten. And I think back then it was like a 4-cent stamp. So that's kind of the start. And then I did with Nancy Sinatra, then she did a musical special, which was also her father, Frank Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr. So I was kind of in that
Wow.
little rat pack then. And then years later, I'm doing Ocean's 11 and Ocean's 12 with the new rat pack.
Yes, that's right, because it's on your CV. You worked obviously with George Clooney and Brad Pitt, but you actually go back to the original Rat Pack.
Wow.
Right.
Amazingly.
Amazing.
Yeah, I
And
was the only one that on the whole set, except for our producer, Jerry Weintraub, that had worked also with Elvis.
yeah. So Elvis himself, how did you find him as a person or a personality?
Oh, so nice, so soft spoken, but he and his all the buddies that he always had around him, they just always were playing jokes on each other. They're just trying to see how they could get the next one, and but thinking, oh, this is real. So I came up with a couple of jokes on Elvis that because they didn't expect it from me at all.
Can you give us an
Oh
example of
yeah,
the joke?
well, one of them, most of his guys, and he smoked like a little cigar, like a Tiparillo or a small cigar.
Hmm.
And so one day I said to him, Elvis, let me light your cigar. Well, I had one of those Zippo lighters that you can add the flame going up or down. So I had it on the high flame and I went to, and it went,
Oh,
and
no.
afterwards I thought, oh my God, well, am I going to blow it off his pompadour?
Yeah.
And then the other thing was he was complaining about how dry his hands were and around his cuticles. And so there's a product that is used when you do a hair lace wig, which is a fine netting along the face, is you glue it with the spirit gum that's invisible. So one day I said to Elvis, I said, I got the best hand lotion for you or oil. And so what I did is I rubbed my hands first in nice smelling lotion because I knew he's always on the alert. So what I said, here, let me give you some of this. And he said, let me smell it. So I let him smell my hand so he could smell the perfume he smelled. And then I poured this glue and he rubbed. I said, oh, it's too much. Rub and rub it. Well, his hands start sticking together. So the makeup man came with the rubbing alcohol and a denatured alcohol to remove it. And the next day when he came to work, he said, I sat all night in front of that TV picking out that stuff out of my cuticles and nails. So we
Wow.
had a good time. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Could I just ask, so you work from Star, everything from Elvis to Kristen Stewart. How do you adapt your approach to fit, when you work with different personalities and time period? How do you adapt to different people?
Well, it's just at the beginning, you just kind of see if they, and the thing is, if they want to talk a lot, if they want to use you as a psychiatrist and, cry, or if they, what their interests are, or they just might, and everyone had a certain kind of music. So usually in our makeup trailer, after we were out of the studios, then we always had music going. And if it was soft music, if it was rock music, whoever we were working with at the time kind of chose the music. So it was a little rock and trailer a lot of times. But you just kind of like when you meet someone, if they're very talkative or quiet, and I just knew how to balance that.
Mm.
Yeah. So the hairstylist in some ways is the confessor figure, they can
Oh
confess
yeah.
things to you that they might not to others. I mean, what I find remarkable about your career is you've worked, you span that era from the end of the studio system right through to, I think you finished up on the working with Kirsten Stewart on the Twilight Saga.
Well, after Twilight, I did later I did with Kristen the Huntsman.
Ah,
And but then I had retired, and then a few years later, Jennifer Aniston, who I'd worked with before, and of course I knew her through Brad in the Oceans 11 and 12 because she'd come to the set, is
mm,
I ended up working with her again. She called me and they took me out of retirement, and I said, okay, I'll come and do it. So that was really my last job, and it's called
yeah.
Dumpling, and it's on, I think, Netflix.
On Netflix. So
Yeah.
obviously it shows the tremendous trust and faith that these stars have in you. That they called, literally, you were called out of retirement.
Mm.
Jennifer Aniston phoned you up and said, could you help her? Can I take you back though to another star from the classic era, Betty Davis, who you worked beside?
Yes. She and Robert Wagner were very, very close friends. And back in the 60s, you didn't see big movie stars working on a TV series.
Mm,
And Robert Wagner was doing, it's called It Takes a Thief. And so he asked Betty, he said, hey, come on and do a little spot, on my film. So I did her, and it was very easy and simple. She's very, not like, ooh, fix this, and oh no, no, it was just like she was into her acting, and her hair and makeup, long as it was, okay, he liked it, that was fine. So I just worked with her on that TV series.
just the once, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so
And then
take
I
things.
worked with Cher too back then
Oh,
on a
Ah,
wow.
he was
Amazing.
yeah, she was on one of the series and was in disguise. So that's when she had that long black hair down to her waist. And I had to disguise her in a blonde wig. So I had to, and these are things that I learned and I trained for, was wrapping that hair so it was so flat against her head and it was evenly distributed. So when the wig went on, there wasn't a bulge here, up here, or back here. And then I put the short blonde wig on her.
all right.
Wow.
Sharing a blonde wig. There's a thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so the changes that you've seen must be immense. You started in that classic era, or is sort of really the tail end of the old style studio system. Then
Mhm.
you took a break, I think, for about 14, 15 years, and then returned to Hollywood. Is that correct?
Well, we went from, yeah, from LA to Indianapolis, and I worked in a high-end beauty salon.
Right.
And then in the 80s is when we went to Dallas, Texas, and found out they were filming. Texas at the time had a good tax incentive, was doing a lot of filming. So I had no idea that I was going to get back in the business. And then I was working in Dallas on several things for, oh, I don't know, a few years, more than a few years. And since I'd start building up a reputation and everything, my husband and I decided to go back to Hollywood. And then that's when I started again. I feel like I almost started over then in Hollywood. But I was very fortunate to get a couple great films with great directors or actors. And then I lost my husband. He was just 55 years old
Mhm.
of cancer.
Mm.
So
And
hard.
uh, my career just took off about a year and a half after
Mm.
that.
Mm.
And it was nonstop to see the
Mm.
world too.
Mhm.
Can I just ask you, so you have seen so many technological or cultural shifts in this. How do you feel that hairstyling has changed? When you started, say, in the period of Elvis, and how
Uh,
has it developed, in your opinion?
well, if you look back, even like any old movies like Rita Hayworth,
Mm.
even in the 40s and 50s, women hardly ever changed their hair. There
Mm.
might be a scene with with a nightgown and robe that their hair might be down or something, but most of the time that hair was like a helmet the whole film. So uh, there were, like when I worked with Nancy Sinatra, we had a fair amount of hair changes, but we didn't like Betty Davis. That, I mean, she had the same hair. So I just found through the years, that's why I have in this book thousands of continuity pictures, because if you watch a lot of the movies today, you'll see how the hair has changed. It's down, it's up, it's over, it's got a hat, it doesn't have a hat. And so we've seen a lot of changes, a lot of more work too, in a way, and especially the continuity. That's so important.
Yeah. And also feeding on from that, how do you think the wider industry has changed? I imagine it must be almost unrecognizable between the start of your career and when you eventually finished up.
Yeah, and everything has gotten into most things such a budget anymore, and so little is being done in Hollywood. They're really hurting now. In
Mm,
fact, I was told the other day, I had someone go to a breakfast, and the proceeds of that breakfast was going to pay union members their dues so they could stay in the union.
right.
So right now, Hollywood is really hurting for film work in Hollywood,
Mm-hmm.
because they can go other places and do it less.
Mm.
But of course, for years, they've been going to other places just because of the exterior scenery.
Mm,
If it's, you know, Australia, they do a lot there. I mean, I did a lot in even Canada
mm-hmm.
because the budget was better there. Plus, for the script, there were certain scenes that worked good in Canada.
Mhm. So obviously one key factor in the change is a lot more travel. You know, in the old days, a lot of stuff would be shot on the lots, presumably, the studio
Oh yeah.
lots, whereas today a lot of travel. And also obviously the decline of the studio system or the old style studio system,
Hmm.
MGM and so forth. Now, of course, it's large corporations like Sony, Disney, and increasingly the tech companies like
Hmm.
Amazon that are coming in. So on the whole, I guess would you say characterize it as a narrative of decline, or do you think that there are advantages now that the old studio system is no longer with us? I mean, where do you fall on that?
Oh, I think there's somewhat of a decline, and I find it sad for so many of the union people that have families and everything. It's really and the budgets, and they're I mean, a lot of actors, even themselves, they're not getting the money that they used to. And I think with things moving, to Netflix and Amazon and all of them, that changes. But as far as the old Hollywood, the class of it and the hours, because like when I was, well, any of the studios I worked at, Universal, Warner Brothers, but like I was at MGM so much that we filmed everything on stage. The only thing we'd go to the back lot once in a while and film some exterior things. But
Mhm.
on Friday, we we were always home, if even if it was 9 o'clock at 10 o'clock at night. Where my last job in before Jennifer Aniston, but I was with Hilary Swank in Africa, and we went to work at 10 in the morning, and we got home the following morning at 6.
Oh my
Whoa.
goodness.
And Oliver Stone, we worked a 24-hour day one time.
Oh, God.
We were ready to wrap, and it was next to the last day of shooting. And Oliver got the whole crew together and said, except for the technicians, everyone could go home or their hotels or whatever, and that come back after so many hours because they would be lighting and everything. And then we would continue, and they would keep us on double and triple time and meal penalties and everything. But then we put 2 days into one.
Yeah.
And so it's, they're just to try to get more and more, out of the workers
Out of the workers.
because budgets.
Yeah. Now, Oliver Stone is somebody I wanted to ask you a bit about and to touch on your work with directors as well as
Mhm.
actors. Now, you were in quite a lot of Oliver Stone pictures, from Born on the 4th of July, JFK, Any Given Sunday, Heaven and Earth. Some absolutely classic Oliver Stone movies. But from that story, it suggests that Oliver Stone's a little bit of a taskmaster. Is he a little bit of a military commander?
Well, he's so brilliant and he knows what he wants, and he's a nice, kind man,
Right.
but you better get it right. And or else, you hear about it. But he carried on with so many of the same crew throughout his film. So it was kind of family, kind of like Steven Soderbergh. I did several with Steven, and it was just kind of family. Everyone knew how to work, what Steven was expecting out of us, and same with Oliver. And
Mhm.
but I think, they're both brilliant directors and human beings.
Yeah.
Can I ask you something though? You have worked with so many amazing people, and you have had such an amazing contribution to this film, but your name yourself isn't in the spotlight, but your work is so unforgettable. How do you feel of being part in the invisible art of the film?
Oh, fine. I mean,
Uh,
it never affected me, or I've thought much about it.
Mhm. So you wouldn't want to be a star in yourself. I mean, you must have
No.
seen so many stars. I mean, we all think about the glamour of Hollywood,
Mhm.
but I suspect also, there's a lot of people maybe don't want to be on the spot in the spotlight all the time. But of course, when you're a star, you have to be the 24/7 in the spotlight. I mean, without obviously going into confidences and with people you've worked with. I mean, have you seen the downside of stardom and glamour?
Oh, yeah, I think a lot of it is when there's crowds and people hanging on automobiles and limousines and, things like that. It's like just almost too much.
Mm,
But yet, I think most of everyone I've worked with understand why they're there, because of those people and the ticket sales or whatever. And I remember with Kristen Stewart and Rob Pattinson, we would end up filming. It was at this little studio, and it was so cold and rainy outside, and we had fans down the road, this country road, just lined up all day. And when they got in the car to go back to town, they had the driver stop and get out of the car and sign autographs for all these people that were in the road all day.
hmm.
And so they really appreciated it. And so I found, you know, people, most of the actors are very kind about it.
Yeah. Also, within your book, there are some lovely still photos of, I guess, what must be the actors being kind to you. There's one image that stuck in my mind of Brad Pitt seeming to present you with a birthday cake. Is that correct?
Yes. And Brad, it was my birthday, and that film was the Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and we had he gave me a birthday cake and beautiful flowers and some gifts. And then when we went to the set after lunch, it was a scene where there was kind of an old ballroom and band, and the women were dressed lovely, and it was women and men dancing, this beautiful
Mm.
music. And he had the band play Happy Birthday and sing, everyone sang Happy Birthday, like 150 people to me.
Oh, wow, that must be
So,
amazing.
yeah, and he's such a great man and just such a giver. I mean, if it was a driver or grip or anyone, and he found out that there was some health problem at their house or someone had got in an accident or their mother was ill, I mean, he just had his assistant would go over to that crew member and just said, Brad wants to do something, you
Oh,
know, whatever, gift certificates, the grocery store, it didn't matter. But he was always aware of what was going on around him and everyone.
Fantastic. And of
Yeah.
course, you worked with Brad on the Oceans movies as well, which also starred George Clooney and Julia
Hmm.
Roberts. Um,
Hmm.
I think you know Julia Roberts quite well. You've worked on quite a number of pictures with Julia Roberts. Is that correct?
Yes, I did 10 movies with Julia,
Wow.
and we started on Aaron Brockovich and then went through the Ocean's 11, Ocean's 12, all of those, plus many in between. And I found with her and Hilary Swank, Kristen Stewart, they all love to cook.
oh,
Right.
And
wow.
so I can't tell you the different times in different countries we were in and what we cooked and what we contributed to or whatever. It it was fun because I love to cook myself. So I was like the mama of the kids,
Yeah.
showing them or them teaching me some new recipes.
Yeah. So, are you able to reveal what Julia Roberts' favorite food is then?
Well, when um when I first started, I don't think we were just in the makeup trailer doing makeup and hair tests for Erin Brockovich.
Mm.
Somehow it came up that she loves sausage biscuits and gravy.
Yeah.
And so after living in Texas and that, I got pretty good at making sausage biscuits and gravy. And so there was a certain time that I got to make it and she fell in love with it. So it became a thing that my reputation got around Hollywood about my sausage biscuits and gravy. And so we used to have uh, a couple friends had weddings, and then Julia had a wedding and different things. So my gift at these weddings were the brunch the next day of the sausage biscuits and gravy. And the last time I was up to 100 and some biscuits and I think 20 pounds of sausage or something. And so there's in the book is the recipe.
Oh,
And I've whenever we went on location, we'd always have her refrigerator stocked with, if it was fruit, strawberries, but we always had everything for sausage, biscuits, and gravy. So we're in Ocean's 11 in Las Vegas, and all the actors had these darling little little houses down below the hotel, and or they're called villas. And so one Sunday afternoon, she said, "What are we going to eat tonight?" And I said, "I don't know." She said, "Well, let's have the sausage, biscuits, and gravy." I said, "For dinner?" I said, "That's a breakfast thing." And she said, "No, let's, because we're going to be leaving soon and we've had it in the fridge." So I said, "Well, then let's order a big fruit tray from the hotel, something, else that might coordinate with this." And all of a sudden, she's doing one thing, I'm doing another, and the door knocks of her villa. And it's Matt Damon. He said, "Boy, we all smell this smell in the hallway. It smells so good. What is it?" He said, "Well, I'm making sausage, biscuit, gravy." Well, before you knew it, at the long dining room table, I had Clooney, I had Brad, I had Matt Damon, I had Don Cheadle. They were all there for it. And then one time when Julie was on Oprah, Oprah kind of looks at her because, Julie's got such a beautiful body. And she said, "And I understand you like sausage, biscuits, and gravy." And Julia says, oh yeah, my friend Bonnie makes the best.
That's
So, in
amazing.
fact, I just saw an interview with Brad on this F1,
Oh yeah.
and the one of the guys he's talking to, the guy's from England, and he's got the English accent and talking about his food,
Mm.
and Brad says, "Oh, but have you ever had sausage, or have you ever had?" He called it gravy and biscuits, and this guy looks at him like, "What's that?" And Brad says, "Oh, it's a golden biscuit, and then this gravy on top. Oh, it is so delicious." And
Sounds
but he
amazing.
didn't say it was my recipe, but
Oh
I used to
no.
make it
Oh,
for
you
him when
must.
I did.
It was actually used,
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Can I just?
So,
you're right to say
but
that in the UK they don't really so much know about that. We Charlotte and I know about it because we've spent a little time in the US.
okay.
But yeah, I guess the equivalent if it's breakfast would probably be bacon, sausage, and eggs or something like
Sorry.
that
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
UK. You know what they call a full English breakfast. Uh,
Right.
Can I?
so,
Can I take you back though to
Yes.
your memoir? It's called "You Continued Life Beyond the Credits." But what inspired you to write this,
Pardon?
and what surprised you most during the process?
Oh, bringing up just so many memories. I mean, naturally, some of them sad, but yet, a lot of my past, just
Mm.
in my upbringing and things that transpired when I was younger and so forth. But then, of course, a lot of wonderful memories and how I grew through my life and my thoughts of life and people and everything. So, it took me years back also.
Do you think that you want to give back, sort of, to to Hollywood, or give back in your
No,
writing, or
no,
no?
no. I think, I mean, Jason and I have other ideas, and he's got some fabulous ideas for other projects and books. But just because of my age too, I'm tired, and I don't have that energy either for the hours, and
Yeah.
because now I've got so many things coming up and interviews and television shows that I'm just trying to save myself.
Mm. Oh
That
yes, yeah. You're an
yeah.
amazing woman. But can I just ask you a bit about what advice? I mean, if a young person wanted to go into Hollywood and become a stylist, or become, what advice would you give a young person wishing to be go on your
Well,
career? Or
I think it hasn't changed a whole lot. They definitely have to have the basic experience of working in a salon and knowing, uh, and then having to really study period work. And for instance, like in part of our tests, we're putting an Indian wig on a stunt man that would fall off a horse. And the thing is, there's certain hairpins in that in a certain direction that you put them in, so when they fall, those wouldn't protrude in the head. So there's all these little things that they'd have to really learn by someone that very experienced, because and there are a few schools they could go to, and in California, that they could do that too. But it's a very slow, long process. And it's more difficult than it ever was.
Mm.
to break in. The I must before we close up this interview, I must also discuss with you one of my favorite films that I see you've worked on was Insomnia, directed by Christopher Nolan, and starring Al Pacino, and you work beside Al Pacino. So I guess an example of a method actor rather than a just a
Oh
style. Yeah.
yeah, Al is just like one of the best. Edward Norton reminds me of somewhat of Al also. They're just I almost next to being geniuses. And
Right.
Al would uh that's the first time I'd worked with Al, and I did just Al. insomnia in Vancouver. And then later I did Any Given Sunday, and then I cut his hair for certain things in Hollywood. But he's one of the best actors I've ever worked with. I mean, without a doubt, he's on top of that list.
Hmm. But in terms of the preparation that he does, was he, when you were styling him, was he in character, as it were, or is he just able to switch on and off a character as soon as
No,
the
he
camera
would kind of start, not like at first thing in the morning with the hair and makeup as much. Uh, but after he'd get to the set, you could see him getting into the groove and the move and in everything that he needed to do in order to be as brilliant as he is. So, kind of kept to himself, that kind of thing, and
Mhm.
kept very quiet wherever we were, if we were outside or inside.
Mhm.
Are there any particular hairstyle you're particularly proud of? You felt, wow, I really, I really succeeded with that one, or
Well, I think probably one was the wig, and I know it's getting a lot of publicity for years, is those wedding scene for Kristen Stewart.
Mm.
I think that with the braid and the bun and this and that as publicly has gotten more than anything I've ever seen. But as far as continuity goes, Julia and Aaron Brockovich, I had so many hairstyles, but not elegant, but I mean, one day she's crying, one day she's working, one day she's sweating. I mean, and then, she had to be in court or she had to be in the office. And so there was just so many different looks that I had with her, but they weren't fancy looks. But it was the continuity of that show was probably one of the biggest I did.
Mm. Amazing. And just to wrap up, because there's so much that we could go into here.
Yeah. Well, we
But
can come back someday too.
yeah, I think we're going to have to do part two here. But somebody else, a director that you've worked beside, who I imagine that movie must have been quite an experience, is when you came back to Hollywood, you worked with Paul Verhoeven on RoboCop, the original RoboCop
Wow.
movie. Now,
Yes.
Verhoeven is quite a character. So, I
Oh, I
mean, how did you
know.
find him?
Oh, quite a character. But that was out of Dallas when I was in the 80s.
Right.
Then we went out of Dallas and then we did part of it in Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
But I mean, he knows what he wants, but I mean, he's very energetic, very outspoken, but good at what he does.
Yeah. Well, he makes these terrific satires, and RoboCop, the original RoboCop, is certainly
Uh,
certainly one of them. But he's got a real cult reputation with movies like RoboCop, and then later, of course, Showgirls and Basic Instinct. Well,
mhm.
look, Bonnie, it's been absolutely terrific talking
Oh,
to
my
you.
pleasure.
Just going to
And
ask you though.
yeah,
We have one question we
one
always
more
ask
question.
our
Sure.
clients.
Go ahead.
So if you go back and give one piece to your younger self, particularly when you're 21, or what would you have said if you met your 21-year-old self today? Piece of advice for the future, or
Maybe not be so hard on yourself.
Mm,
I think take
close thing.
everything a little lighter and not quite so serious because at the beginning naturally it was wonderful and that, but I was sweating every day I went to
Mm,
work and hoping that I'd please not just the actor but the director and the producers, and it wasn't just one person, and getting along in the makeup trailer with new hairdressers and new makeup artists. And so I think just take more deep breaths.
that's good advice. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's lovely advice and great advice to end on. Well, thanks ever so much, Bonnie. I'm sure this book,
Okay.
Continuity: Life Beyond the Credits, is going to fly off proverbial bookshelves or online bookstores. If nothing else, not just for all these wonderful stories about the stars, but hey, for your recipe for sausage, biscuits, and gravy.
I know that's in there.
Yeah.
And
So,
and
so
how can
good luck with it.
and how can if they want to go find out more, or they can buy your book, but how else can they get in touch? You said you had a website and
Well, if they go use my name and then go on IMDb, that's the movie database.
Yeah.
And so they just put my name and then they can see everything I've done. It's just a whole list of everything.
Great. Well, thanks ever so much, Bonnie. And
Oh, well, thank
all
you
the,
for inviting me.
yeah, a pleasure. And all the best with your forthcoming memoir. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.